At 4:12 local time in the Strait of Hormuz, inside the Combat Information Center of the escorting destroyer, the sonar operator leans in, eyes fixed on the acoustic display. At first, nothing seems out of the ordinary, just the familiar layer of background noise that always fills shallow water. Merchant traffic, distant engines, the deep hum of tankers moving through the narrow Gulf shipping lanes. Then a new signal appears. Faint, low frequency, slow, bearing 142. The operator listens again through the headset. The pattern is clear now. Heavy propeller blades, evenly spaced. Not a merchant vessel, not surface traffic. Something is moving below the waterline. Con, sonar, possible submerged contact, bearing 142. The officer of the deck does not answer right away. In the Strait of Hormuz, false contacts are common. The water is shallow, crowded, and acoustically chaotic. Then the display flickers again. A second signature appears on bearing 155, almost identical in profile. Another submerged contact, and this one is moving slowly toward the carrier strike group. Now the operator's voice changes. Con, sonar, second contact confirmed, subsurface bearing 155. Several people inside CIC turn toward the sonar console. Two contacts, both with diesel-electric characteristics, both approaching the same point. The aircraft carrier at the center of the formation. Before anyone says a word, a third signature appears, bearing 168. Another propeller pattern, another submerged engine, three separate tracks, three different bearings, all converging. The room grows still. Con, sonar, we now have three possible submarines. For a moment, the words seem to hang in the air. Three submarines in the narrowest choke point of the Persian Gulf, in waters less than 40 meters deep. The officer of the deck immediately shifts to the tactical display. Range? The sonar operator checks again. Estimated 11 nautical miles, closing slowly. Speed 4 knots. 4 knots is not transit speed. 4 knots is stalking speed. Slow enough to stay quiet, fast enough to maneuver into position. Inside CIC, the acoustic analysts get to work fast. Blade count, propeller cadence, engine harmonics. Every submarine leaves its own fingerprint in the water. Within seconds, a picture starts to form. Diesel-electric propulsion, large propeller diameter, heavy hull displacement. One analyst leans closer to the console. Possible kilo-class profile. Another technician checks the second contact, then the third. Smaller signature, could be Fate class. Iranian submarines operating inside the strait, already within potential torpedo range. At 4:14, the tactical display updates again. Three red symbols appear beneath the surface layer of the map, each one edging closer to the strike group. Above the water, everything still looks normal. The carrier continues at steady speed through the shipping lane, escorted by destroyers and cruisers in a protective screen. Tankers move methodically through the traffic lanes. Morning sunlight flashes across the calm Gulf. Nothing seems out of place. But below the surface, the geometry of an attack is starting to take shape. Three submarines, three approach angles, a textbook setup for a coordinated torpedo strike. The sonar operator listens again. For a moment, one propeller noise fades, then returns. One of the submarines has altered course. Its bearing shifts 5 degrees, now pointed directly toward the carrier's projected track. Inside CIC, the tactical officer speaks quietly into the internal communications line. Bridge, CIC, possible triple submarine contact. Recommend anti-submarine posture on the carrier's bridge. The captain receives the report without interrupting. Three submarines, inside 11 nautical miles. Converging. No raised voice, no sudden rush of orders, just a brief reply. Very well, a short pause. Then the command that changes the posture of the entire strike group. Set condition 3, anti-submarine watch across multiple ships. The shift begins immediately. Sonar systems move to active standby. Helicopter crews start engines on the flight decks. Destroyers subtly adjust their spacing around the carrier. The formation tightens. But underwater, the submarines keep moving. Slow, silent, patient. At 4:17, the sonar operator hears it first. A sudden metallic thud carries through the water, followed by the sharp surge of a high-speed propeller ignition. The acoustic spectrum spikes. The operator's head snaps up. Then another launch, and another. 3 separate acoustic signatures, 3 different bearings, all accelerating fast. His voice cuts across CIC. Torpedo in the water. A second later, multiple torpedoes. 3, 4, high speed. On the tactical display, the new contacts appear like arrows slicing through the sea. They are already moving faster than any submarine, driving straight toward the carrier strike group. 3 Iranian submarines have opened fire. And somewhere in the dark water beneath the Strait of Hormuz, a critical countdown has begun. At 4:18 local time, the call echoes through the Combat Information Center. Torpedo in the water. For a fraction of a second, the room goes quiet. Then training takes over. Every screen inside CIC switches to torpedo tracking mode. Sonar returns flood the displays as the incoming weapons carve loud acoustic paths through the confined waters of the strait. The sonar operator locks onto the first contact. High-speed propeller signature, heavy cavitation, bearing 153, speed increasing. Con, sonar, torpedo 1 confirmed, range 8,000 yards, closing fast. Another operator tracks the second weapon. Second torpedo, bearing 166, similar profile. Then a third and a fourth. The acoustic picture settles into focus. 4 separate weapons launched almost at the same time from 3 different directions. The geometry is instantly clear. Inside CIC, the tactical officer studies the display for less than 2 seconds before speaking. Triangulated attack pattern. The submarines did not fire at random. Each boat launched along a different vector, creating a wide engagement zone around the carrier's projected path. The logic is simple. Force the target to evade one torpedo and turn into the path of another. Classic submarine doctrine. Extremely dangerous when executed correctly. On the bridge of the aircraft carrier, the captain gets the update. 4 torpedoes inbound, multiple bearings. The decision comes instantly. Helm hard to port, 20 degrees. The massive carrier begins to respond. But a ship displacing 100,000 tons does not turn quickly. Even with nuclear reactors driving full power through 4 shafts, the momentum is immense. The carrier begins a slow arc through the water. Below decks, engineering increases shaft output. Above decks, crew members brace instinctively as the giant vessel starts to pivot. But the carrier was never meant to outrun a torpedo. That is why the escorts are there. At 4:19, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers surge forward from their screening positions. USS Mason, USS Gravely. Their mission changes in an instant. Protect the carrier, intercept the torpedoes, find the submarines. Deploy Nixie. The order moves across both destroyers at the same time. Behind each ship, the AN/S LQ-25 Nixie torpedo decoy system drops into the water. A long cable streams aft, towing a small torpedo-shaped acoustic emitter through the sea. Within seconds, the device starts broadcasting a powerful artificial signature, louder than the ship itself, designed to pull incoming torpedoes away from real targets. Inside CIC, the tracks keep closing. Range 6,000 yards, speed 50 knots. The water around the strike group is now alive with sound. Destroyers maneuvering, decoys transmitting, sonar pings rolling outward. Above the formation, the first helicopter lifts off. An MH-60R Seahawk rises from the destroyer's flight deck, rotors hammering the air as it accelerates low over the water. A second Seahawk launches from another ship seconds later. Their crews already know the mission. Find the submarines. Because the moment a submarine fires a torpedo, it gives away its position. At 4:20, back inside CIC, the torpedo picture tightens. Then the first incoming weapon suddenly changes course. Its seeker locks onto the Nixie decoy streaming behind one of the destroyers. Contact 1 diverting. On the display, the acoustic trace bends sharply away from the carrier. The decoy is doing exactly what it was built to do. A few seconds later, the second torpedo turns as well. The artificial signal is stronger, closer, and far more tempting than the fading sound of the carrier's propellers. But the third weapon does not move off target. Its seeker stays fixed on the original objective. Con, Torpedo 3 still tracking carrier. Bearing steady, range now under 4,000 yards. Inside CIC, the pressure rises instantly. At 50 knots, that distance disappears fast. The fourth torpedo also begins to adjust course, but not toward the decoy. It turns toward the carrier's new heading. The submarine crews had expected evasive maneuvers and programmed their weapons for it. Now, 2 torpedoes are still chasing the carrier. Across the strike group, ships maneuver hard. Destroyers cut across the carrier's wake. Helicopters race toward the launch area. Sonar systems drive active pulses deep into the water, each metallic ping rolling across the seabed like thunder, searching, listening, hunting. At 4:21, one of the helicopters gets the first solid return. A strong echo, large hull, depth estimated at 400 feet. Bearing matches one of the torpedo launch vectors. The pilot banks hard. Contact confirmed. The hunters have found one of their targets. But behind them, in the dark water beneath the carrier strike group, the torpedoes are still closing. Range 2,000 yards. Time to impact less than 2 minutes. At 4:21 local time, above the strike group, the first MH-60R Seahawk turns sharply toward the contact. The helicopter flies low, barely 200 feet over the water. Rotor wash tears white streaks across the calm surface of the strait as the aircraft rushes toward the suspected submarine position. Inside the cabin, the sensor operator studies the tactical feed coming up from the destroyer below. One contact, large, submerged. Depth estimated 400 feet. Speed minimal, attempting to go quiet. But once a submarine fires torpedoes, going quiet becomes much harder. The Seahawk crew already knows the next step. Prepare, sonar boys. The rear door slides open. Seconds later, the first cylindrical buoy drops into the sea, then another, and another. Within moments, a string of acoustic sensors spreads across the water like a wide listening net. Each buoy lowers a hydrophone deep below the surface and sends real-time data back to the helicopter. The operator adjusts his headset. Suddenly, the ocean fills with detail. Propeller wash, hydraulic noise, the distant shriek of torpedo engines, and beneath it all, the steady mechanical rhythm of a submarine. Contact acquired, bearing 164. The helicopter circles wider. More sonobuoys drop. The listening grid expands quickly across the attack area. In under 2 minutes, dozens of sensors are feeding data into the strike group's combat network. The floor of the Strait of Hormuz is no longer quiet. It has become a live underwater contest. At 4:22, near the carrier, the torpedo picture shifts again. 2 incoming weapons break away. Their seekers lock onto the destroyer's decoys, chasing the louder acoustic signals trailing through the water. The first torpedo passes well behind an escort ship. Seconds later, it explodes far from the formation, triggered by its proximity fuse. A heavy underwater shockwave rolls outward, but the carrier remains untouched. Inside CIC, one threat disappears from the screen. Contact 1 neutralized, but the danger is not over. The remaining torpedoes keep closing. One begins circling the decoy field, confused, searching for a better target. The 4th torpedo is still locked onto the carrier's propulsion signature. Range now 1,500 yards. On the bridge, the captain gives another order. Rudder hard starboard. The giant ship swings again, changing course to disrupt the torpedo's tracking solution. Below the surface, the weapons seeker tries to recalculate. Now the acoustic environment is chaos. Multiple ships maneuvering, decoys sending false signals, active sonar pulses bouncing across the seabed. For a fraction of a second, the torpedo hesitates. That brief hesitation changes everything. The Nixie decoy drifts directly into its path. The weapon locks onto the stronger signal and turns sharply away from the carrier. A few seconds later, a distant underwater blast. The final torpedo is gone. But the confrontation is far from finished, because the submarines that launched them are still below the surface. At 4:23, the Seahawk tightens its orbit above the sonobuoy grid. Inside the cabin, the sensor operator now sees the pattern clearly. 3 submarines. One is attempting to withdraw south. Another has slowed dramatically. The third is diving deeper, likely trying to hide beneath the thermocline, where shifting layers of water can bend sound and make tracking far more difficult. The operator speaks into the intercom, calm and precise. Primary contact confirmed. Kilo class profile. Depth 420 feet. The pilot glances at the targeting display. Weapon ready? Ready. The helicopter steadies over the target zone. Below, the water looks completely calm. No sign of the steel vessel hidden hundreds of feet beneath the surface. The weapons officer flips the release switch. A Mark 54 torpedo drops from the Seahawk's belly. It hits the sea with a sharp splash and disappears instantly below the waves. For a brief second, nothing follows. Then its engine ignites. A violent stream of bubbles marks its path as the weapon drives downward. Unlike the torpedoes launched by the submarines, this one is not searching blindly. It is going after a specific contact, guided by the helicopter's sonar grid. Inside the Seahawk, the operator watches the tracking display without looking away. 2 symbols move across the screen. 1 submarine, 1 incoming torpedo. The distance between them is closing fast. Deep underwater, the Iranian crew finally understands the situation. What was meant to be a surprise attack has turned into exposure. They react instantly. Emergency maneuver. Ballast tanks flood. The submarine angles downward, diving deeper, trying to disappear into the uneven seabed of the strait. But the Mark 54 is already tracking. It adjusts smoothly, matching every turn, closing the distance fast. At 4:24, a powerful underwater blast tears through the water. The shockwave surges upward, briefly lifting the surface above the detonation point. Inside the Seahawk, the display changes in an instant. The submarine contact is gone. 1 submarine has been eliminated, but 2 more are still somewhere below, moving through the narrow waters of Hormuz, and the helicopters are already searching for them. At 4:24 local time, the surface above the strike group looks calm again. But inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical display tells the real story. 1 contact has disappeared. 2 remain. Both are moving now, trying to retreat deeper into the strait. But their positions are already known. Because what the Iranian crews never realized is that their movements had been tracked long before the first torpedo was ever launched. 12 hours earlier, before the carrier strike group entered the narrowest section of the Strait of Hormuz, a Boeing P-8 Poseidon had quietly flown a surveillance pattern over the region. The mission looked routine, but during that flight, the aircraft deployed more than 100 sonar buoys across a wide grid covering nearly 70 square miles. Each buoy carried a sensitive hydrophone, capable of detecting even the faintest mechanical noise beneath the surface. Propeller rotation, hull vibration, engine harmonics. Individually, each buoy monitored a small patch of ocean. Together, they formed a dense underwater detection network, silent, constant, already in place beneath the shipping lanes. So when the Iranian submarine slipped into the strait earlier that night, they were already being heard. Their entry bearings, their speeds, even their gradual positioning toward the strike group's projected path. At first, the submarines maintained strict discipline, low speed, minimal noise, careful navigation along the seabed, classic diesel-electric infiltration. But the buoy network had already captured their acoustic signatures. Analysts aboard the P-8 and on the escorting ships could see the pattern forming hours in advance. 3 submarines, moving into a triangular formation, each taking a different attack vector. The pattern was clear, an ambush. But instead of changing course immediately, the strike group continued its planned transit. The carrier moved forward. The escorts held formation. On the surface, nothing changed. But beneath that calm appearance, preparations were already underway. Helicopters were placed on standby. Destroyers tightened their defensive positions. Sonar teams focused on the incoming data from the buoy network. They watched the submarines move into range. They watched the attack take shape. And when the torpedoes were finally launched, the strike group was already ready to respond. Now back in the present, the situation is turning. At 4:25, the second Seahawk arrives above the buoy field. Its crew immediately begins scanning for the remaining contacts. Inside the cabin, the sensor operator studies the data carefully. One contact moving south, speed increasing, attempting to break away. The second contact slowing, possibly trying to settle near the seabed. But both positions are already fixed by the network. Contact 2 confirmed, depth approximately 450 feet. The pilot banks sharply toward the location. Below the helicopter, the sea remains completely calm, but hundreds of feet down, a submarine is moving fast through darkness. Inside that submarine, the crew now understands. The attack has failed, and aircraft are already overhead. The captain orders a deeper dive. Ballast tanks flood again. The submarine sinks into colder, denser layers near the bottom, hoping the uneven terrain will interfere with tracking. But the helicopter already has a firing solution. Weapon ready. Confirmed. The Seahawk steadies briefly over the target area. Then the second Mark 54 drops. It enters the water cleanly. For a moment, it sinks in silence. Then the engine ignites. A violent stream of bubbles marks its acceleration as it begins its hunt. Inside the helicopter, the operator watches the display closely. 2 moving points, the submarine, and the incoming weapon. The distance between them shrinks quickly. Below, the submarine makes a desperate move. Sharp turn, increased speed, trying to outrun the seeker. But modern torpedoes don't chase blindly. They listen, they adjust, they adapt. The Mark 54 curves through the water, reacquires the target, and closes in again. At 4:26, another deep, powerful explosion rolls through the sea. The Seahawk's sensors register it instantly. The submarine contact disappears from the screen. A rising column of bubbles marks the impact point far below. 2 submarines are now gone, but 1 remains. Somewhere in the complex underwater terrain of the Strait of Hormuz, a single submarine is still moving, and every sonar buoy in the network is listening for it. At 4:27 local time inside the Combat Information Center, the display stabilizes once again. Just moments ago, it was filled with movement. Torpedo tracks, active sonar pulses, evasive maneuvers, helicopters sweeping overhead. Now, 2 of the red submarine symbols are gone, confirmed destroyed. 1 contact remains, bearing 187, depth unknown, speed increasing. The last submarine is running. The sonar operator adjusts the gain on his headset and listens carefully. At first, the sound is faint, just a distant mechanical hum deep beneath the water. Then slowly the signature becomes clearer, the sound becomes sharper. Propeller cavitation, higher RPM. The submarine captain has increased speed. Running faster means more noise. Running slower means no chance to escape. The choice is made. They go for speed. Above the surface, the Seahawk helicopters expand their search pattern. 1 aircraft moves west, releasing more sonobuoys and stretching the acoustic grid deeper into the strait. The second remains near the last known position, circling and listening carefully beneath the thermocline layer. Within minutes, the network grows again. Dozens of sensors now cover the water column. Every hydrophone feeds real-time data back to the destroyers. Every faint mechanical sound is captured. At 4:29, the destroyer's sonar team locks onto a stronger return. Con, sonar, Possible submarine, bearing 189, range 4 nautical miles. The contact is deeper now, likely staying close to the uneven seabed where underwater ridges scatter sonar signals. The submarine is trying to use the terrain as cover, but the Strait of Hormuz is shallow. There is very little room to hide. Every movement creates turbulence. Every change in propeller speed leaves a trace, and the entire area is being monitored. The tactical officer studies the display for a few seconds. The submarine is heading south, toward the narrow channel that leads deeper into the Persian Gulf. If it reaches the dense commercial shipping lanes, tracking will become much harder. Tankers, cargo ships, hundreds of engines, a wall of background noise. That is where the submarine hopes to disappear. The nearest Seahawk reacts immediately. Vector to contact. The pilot banks south, flying low and fast over the water. Inside the cabin, the operator watches the updates. The submarine's speed increases again, 6 knots, then 8. Too loud for stealth, but fast enough to reach the edge of the sonar grid. The weapons officer prepares another torpedo, but aboard the destroyer, the tactical officer pauses. The submarine is still inside the surveillance network, still tracked, still visible. Eliminating it now would be easy, but letting it run could reveal something more valuable. Where it is heading, where it might return, where its base could be. The decision moves quickly through the strike group. Maintain tracking, hold fire, not yet. At 4:31, the submarine continues south. Its propeller noise fades slightly with distance. But the network continues to follow. Bearing updates come in every few seconds. Every course adjustment is recorded. Every change in speed is logged. The crew inside the submarine believes they are escaping. In reality, they are still being watched. Above the strait, the Seahawk helicopters widen their patrol. One climbs slightly, scanning the horizon. The other stays low, following the projected path of the contact. Below them, the carrier strike group restores its formation. Destroyers return to their screening positions. Cruisers stabilize their coverage. The carrier resumes steady speed through the strait. No damage, no losses. The entire encounter lasted less than 15 minutes. Inside CIC, the final submarine contact grows weaker as it approaches the southern edge of the sensor grid. Eventually, the sound fades into the background noise of distant shipping traffic. The operator slowly removes his headset. Contact lost. But the information remains. Every sonar recording, every launch detection, every maneuver, stored, studied, cataloged. Above the calm waters of the Strait of Hormuz, nothing seems unusual. Merchant vessels continue their slow transit between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean. Sunlight reflects across the surface. The carrier strike group moves steadily west, but far below, the traces of the brief underwater clash remain. 2 destroyed submarines resting somewhere on the seabed, one escape route leading south, and a clear signal delivered without a single missile launched. Because in the narrow waters of Hormuz, every movement is tracked. Every sound is recorded, and every submarine captain understands one thing. The ocean can hide you for a while, but someone is always listening.